Our next work of art is the David. Michelangelo's David, which was commissioned or paid for by the Opera del Duomo. This is the committee of the Duomo, of the cathedral. And they hired him in 1501 to complete one sculpture of many that were going to be placed on the outside of the now complete Florence Cathedral. I clap because Florence Cathedral had been under construction for hundreds of years and finally was nearing completion. Now here is an image of the front exterior of Florence Cathedral, the Duomo, and you can see how there are these statues decorating the interior of these niches. The idea was to have a continuous line of sculptures to go on the sides of the nave or the sanctuary and around the base of the dome. And that was where one of these statues by Michelangelo was going to be placed. That statue was the David. Now, David, hold up. Is this David? David from the story of David and Goliath? The Prophet David, king of the Israelites, the shepherd boy who fought Goliath and won? Yes, David. David was a young shepherd boy who received word that God was on his side and that he could defeat the enemy, the Philistines. So David walks up to the battle line where the Israelites were fighting against the Philistines and told the generals, I have heard that I can save us, that I can defeat the enemy. And they said, do you want some armor? And he said, no, I have God on my side. They said, do you want a weapon? He said, no, I have God on my side and I will use the weapon of a shepherd, which is rocks and a leather strap or a sling. And with that, he walked up to the enemy, the Philistines, and he faced a single soldier, Goliath. Goliath the giant, between 7 to 10 feet tall Goliath. And he took his sling, he took his rocks, he swung it around and knocked Goliath square on the forehead, knocking him down, cutting off of his head. And then the rest of the Israelites realized that God was on David's side, God was on their side, and they quickly defeated the Philistines. That's the story of David. What we see here is the moment before the defeat of Goliath. We don't see ahead of Goliath. Instead, what we have is the sling resting on his shoulder and a couple of rocks in his hand. What is he looking at? He's looking at Goliath. His eye is raised and he's assessing the situation. So now that we've established what we're looking at, let's look at this in terms of its characteristics as a Renaissance work of art. First of all, what is his posture? You know this. What is he standing in? I better hear you shout at the screen, Contrapposto, Miss Cortez. Yes, he stands in contrapposto. This contrapposto, to stand against, that balance of engaged and disengaged. Notice how the weight of his body is resting on his right leg and his left leg bends. It shifts the weight and his hip, one hip rises, one hip descends. The opposite is in the shoulders. The right hip rises, the right shoulder drops. The left hip drops, the left shoulder rises. We see a balance of opposites. We see one arm engaged, one arm relaxed, one leg engaged, one leg relaxed. And remember This is something that comes from the composition of contrapposto comes from ancient Greek and ancient Roman art, and that the use of contrapposto is not just an expression of a perfect body or a balanced body, but a balanced mind. So when we see a figure standing in contrapposto, it is not just in control of the body, it's in control of the mind. And when we take into consideration the gestures, where he's looking, what he's holding, we can further appreciate his balance of mind, because this is before the moment when he kills Goliath. I show you this view because it's not only a great understanding of contrapposto, but also, you see that leather strap of the sling? And then if we here, look at, it's massive. This piece is huge. He stands at 13 feet 5 inches. Here. If we look at the other gestures, this is the hand that holds the rocks. This is the expression on his face. What we see is a man who is active and alert, but not freaking out. He's in control. There is this precision. Mind and body working together in harmony to defeat the enemy. Wow, 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 wow. It's intense, right? Now, when we look at it today, it stands in its own niche in a museum. We're going to talk about when and why it moved there. But we're able to then appreciate all of these finer details, like the expression on his face. And look at these raised veins. Oh, we know Michelangelo does that so well, right? Look at the muscular back. Look at the attention to the rise and fall of the muscles on his back and the spine. Yes, his butt. Yes, it's very nice. Okay, calm down. Look at these intense details of a furrowed brow and the eyebrows. All of these things which can only be appreciated when looking at it really, really up close. So why do I bring that up? Because it wasn't originally supposed to be seen up close. Do you remember? Remember I said it was going to be placed at the top of the cathedral. Here to help demonstrate, in November of 2010, an artist installed a fiberglass version of the two size, the Michelangelo David, as it would have originally been placed on the side of the Duomo. And this is the view we would have had. It's way up here on top of the cathedral. It's not something that we would have had an intimate connection with, because all of those finer details that we've just been appreciating would have been lost. I call our attention to it now. Here, this is a video I want to show you. Here we go.
While I do this, Brent, while I do this, it's got a really bad
How is this?
worried? Really? Yeah. It's kind of calm.
Okay, so now after watching that video where we got to walk around the entire sculpture and then taking into consideration that it was originally to be placed way up here, it is remarkable, to say the least, at the amount of detail that Michelangelo put into this figure. So let's look at it. Oh yes, it's a balance. Yes, we got that. Gesture, harmony, balance. Sure. Let's look at it and think about how he sculpted this with the intention of it being placed on top of a roof. So while we were marveling at the smaller details, those elements of reality, like the veins and the muscular, the muscles in the back, let's look at this in terms of proportions. And be honest. Is he in correct proportions? Look at the proportion of his head to his torso, to his legs, that hand. It's not quite right. This hand is way too big. His head is too big. His legs seem to be too short for this extremely long torso. Like, what is going on? Does Michelangelo not know what the correct or ideal proportions would be? No, it's not that. He's very much aware. What he's doing is taking into consideration our view of looking at this extreme angle up at the figure, and to balance our skewed perspective, he's exaggerated some elements, like the hand. That hand is way too big. Both hands are. But both hands, in terms of gesture, are telling a story. And for us, looking up at the Duomo going, I don't see it. Who is that? I just see a statue. These bigger hands help us go, I think he's holding rocks. It's maybe the statue of David. Oh, so exaggerating the hands. His weapons, his tools for killing Goliath. Ooh, okay. What else? Well, the exaggeration of his torso is so that you don't look up and then just see legs and a head on top of some hips. So the skewed perspective is then corrected by these exaggerated proportions. Another element, let me go to his face here. Let's use this one. So people often will look at David and think, you know, oh, what a hunk. And then they look at his face and they're like, ew, he's actually not that cute. I'm not making any judgments here, okay? That's just what people say. But the exaggeration of his eyes and his ears, I know I'm going back and forth. Let me just get into this image here. Okay. His extreme expression with this very heavy brow, with this furrowed brow, right? Those exaggerated eyebrows create this shadow over his eyes. And then Michelangelo has cut deep into the eye to create this very heavy, hollow space, right? And then look at that ear. An ear, not only is it very big and pronounced, but there's this really dense shadow where Michelangelo has chiseled deeper into the space. Also, this mop of curls he has. Gorgeous curls, but they also are very heavy in the front, creating almost like this bill or this like cap of hair. All of this is to help in its original location because Michelangelo understands it's going to be placed up and it's going to be out in the open, which means the sun is going to shine down on it. And the sun, this hot Italian sun, is going to be bright and intense, and it's going to wash out any finer details on the figure. So in order to create any sense of line and shape and shadow, you're going to need to exaggerate those elements. So that's why he cuts deep into the eye socket to emphasize a shadow that the sun cannot blanch out. The heavy mop of curls creates this shade over the face so that we can see the face, and that when we're standing below it, it doesn't just look like a blank slate of nothingness. So the elements that are off for a reason. He knows the rules, and he knows when and how to break them seamlessly. Now, I keep talking about where it was originally supposed to be placed, on top of the church in Florence. Florence has a very particular connection to David, the biblical figure David. Florence sees itself as David. They have been protected from catastrophes by God. They see themselves as battling their own Goliaths. Every enemy is Goliath, and they are victorious, just like David. And so even before Michelangelo is done with the sculpture, there are visitors coming into his studio. The Opera del Duomo committee members come in and they say, Michelangelo, this is gorgeous. We can't put this at the top of the Duomo where nobody can appreciate the finer details, the smaller elements of this piece. We need it to be close to us. We are David. And so they decided to place it instead of on top of the cathedral, to place it in front of the Palazzo della Signora, in the piazza, that public square. And it is going to be in front of the city hall because Florence sees themselves as David. This is a symbol of Florence. And Michelangelo's David then will stand as a symbol of Florence too. Interesting. So here is a painting of Florence, and the statue, after Michelangelo was done with it, was placed right in front. And it was there. It was there until the 1800s. For a time, it had a skirt. The skirt was put around his little waist to give him a little bit more modesty, because as fashions changed after the Renaissance, his bold nudity was seen as offensive to the women and children who would be walking around. They can't see a penis. Oh! And so they gave him a skirt, and then that went away. And then the sculpture, Michelangelo's original sculpture, was transported to the Accademia. Oh, here's my joke about that. Ha 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 ha. The original sculpture was transferred to the Accademia, which is a museum in Florence. When you go to Florence today, you'll walk around the Piazza della Signora, and you're going to see a statue of David, and you're going to see lots of people taking a picture of it. That is not the original. That is an official copy. The original is at the Accademia, which is just up the road. Now you can go to it. The Accademia is the old art school, the old art academy in Florence, and it's been converted into a museum, and he has his own little room there. You buy your tickets in advance online, and it was moved to the Accademia to protect it from the elements and also from vandalism and looting. So when you go to Florence, you'll know where the real statue is. Now, I've also included below a video talking about the reception of the artwork by the public, and it's not required, but it's interesting, so you can watch it. And then before I leave, I'll just tell you one story. So I was at the Accademia, and I was looking at this sculpture, and I was like, oh, yay, David. And there were all these artists, these young artists who are out there, and they're all sketching, right? They all got their little diseños going on, and they're trying to capture the magic of Michelangelo's David. And I'm walking around, and this one young man comes up with his sketch, and he says, you want to buy it? You want to buy my sketch of the David? I'll sell it to you. And I look at his sketch, and it's basically like this. It's not that impressive. I mean, he obviously didn't know I was an art historian, and I was like, oh, thanks, no, it's okay. So anyways, I want you to go take video, take selfies, and then send them to me.